Okay, I want to thank everyone for staying, and I want to thank the weather for giving me a little bit of extra time here to give a presentation. The ASA has been running an aquaculture program for quite some time. In fact, since 1986, we've been having aquaculture projects and demonstrations and bringing technical support to the industry. However, most of you probably don't know much about it, because although I see some old friends in the audience, I think most people are focused on swine, cattle, poultry, human nutrition. The ASA really has been working very hard in China, and then starting about 5 years ago, really went worldwide with aquaculture programs. So what I'd like to do today is, although my presentation has the potential of Southeast Asian aquaculture, it's difficult to separate Southeast Asia from the rest of the world when it comes to aquaculture. So I'm going to have to focus on all of aquaculture, and I'll try to keep some focus on the Southeast Asian aspect as well. So when I was approached to give this presentation, I was really asked to give some big picture ideas about what's happening in the aquaculture industry. So the things I'm going to focus on today, of course, are aquafeed use, some aquaculture systems, species, climate change, certification schemes, diseases and drugs, aquaculture ingredients, soybeans, of course, coming from the American Soybean Association, International Marketing Program, and some of the conclusions based on what I've talked about. So luckily, some of the stage has been set by the speakers who have spoken before me about the need for increasing production of protein, including fish protein, animal protein, and crops. Aquaculture has been growing very rapidly. It's still one of the smallest of the animal protein sources, but it's growing very quickly. And why is it growing quickly? Well, one of the major reasons is that capture fisheries has been decreasing because wild stocks are either at fully takeable levels or are in declining mode. So the only source of increased production or increased sources of fish are going to be through aquaculture. Of course, population growth is one of those aspects too. We heard that Indonesia has a very high proportion of people who like to eat fish. Fish is a popular dish worldwide in many cultures, and so it continues to increase as the population increases. And fish is also seen as a very high quality protein. It's seen as oftentimes as a health food. We hear a lot about omega-3 proteins. That's something that's usually very high in seafood products. So when it comes to feed consumption for aquaculture, we're looking sort of a breakdown like this. And a lot of my audiences are surprised by how much of aquafeed production is actually from freshwater fish. But to put this in perspective, the two largest producers of aquaculture products are China and India, and both of those are dominated by freshwater carps. So a lot of that feed is going to freshwater carps in those two countries. Of course, shrimp, we all know, is a big industry in Southeast Asia. We just heard about Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia is coming up in production. Vietnam certainly has a high production as well. And then brackish water and marine fish. This is something the ASA has really been working hard on. We're bringing more expertise actually into Southeast Asia to help the Southeast Asian industry to improve the marine fish culture here in this area. But when it comes to most people thinking about seafood, they think about marine fish. And that's why we feel that this is going to be a very big growing segment of the aquaculture production. So we went through an exercise with Dr. Victor Suresh this year. We tried to sort of estimate, based on talking to the industry, how much aquaculture feed production there is currently. We came out to about 25 million metric tons in 2008, and that was based on taking examples of the top 5 fish feed producers, and the top 5 shrimp feed producers. We estimated that for Southeast Asia, we're looking somewhere over 4 million metric tons of production. These two charts give a little bit of an idea of how the production is distributed by region. But I also, while I was sitting back there, I thought you might like some more specific numbers. So I'm glad these screens are very big so you can see this. This is sort of a snapshot of look at the world production. Now, as everyone knows, data can be used in many different ways. What I did was I took the FAO data for aquaculture, and then I took out only the things that were important to feed production. So that meant crustaceans, such as shrimp, and then fish, which would be either fresh, marine, or diadromous, such as salmon. So you can see in this decade, from 2000 to 2007, we've increased in the world by 27% in production of aquaculture production. And you can see that the total was around 33 million metric tons. So then I broke out just for Asia. Now, Asia is a primary producer of aquaculture products in the world, and you can see here in 2007 it was around 32.2 million metric tons. And then for Southeast Asia, which I defined here below as these countries, Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam, we have about 5 or almost 6 million metric tons. So you can see, as a proportion of the growth, that for Southeast Asia we have a very quick increase of production in Southeast Asia. And countries such as people who are familiar with the Vietnamese experience with aquaculture, there's a very big growing industry with Pangasius catfish in that area. That's bringing up a lot of production, and that industry has really exploded. We see that that's a potential industry that's going to increase in other places. Indonesia is looking at Pangasius. Thailand already does produce Pangasius. Cambodia produces Pangasius. India is looking at producing Pangasius. So we're looking at this is becoming another major freshwater species along with carps and tilapia. So if my Excel program didn't lead me wrong, what I did was I tried to compare the different areas to each other by production. So in these first two lines, we're looking at what the production is of the world versus Asia. Now Asia, we always say, well, Asia is producing around 90% of the world's production. Well, according to the FAO data in 2007, it was actually producing around 97% of the world's aquaculture production. Southeast Asia in the world is producing about 18% of that total production. So we are a very big industry here. And when we talk about Southeast Asia, the two main producers are China, which produces around 70% of the world's aquaculture, and then India, which is maybe about 6%. So our primary driver of aquaculture production after that is Southeast Asia. So where are we going to see this increase in aquafeeds production? Well, China still has a lot of room to grow. They're still growing their feed industries. They're still building a lot of feed mills, and they're still working on getting fish onto aquafeed systems, particularly for marine fish, because they're looking towards the future where they're going to try to produce more fish offshore, and those are going to have to be feed-based systems. India is someplace that we think will be growing rapidly as well. When I first started with the ASAIM, I worked in India and Southeast Asia together. And when I first went to India, pretty much none of the fish there, the fish, not the shrimp, but the fish there were not being produced on feeds. So that whole industry was basically being put on a manure-based system, or maybe some supplemental feeds such as rice pollard or wheat powder or something like that. So this industry has nowhere to go but up in terms of the feed industry there, and we're seeing that happen now with the rapid construction of feed mills and the rapid adoption of feed-based technologies. Okay, so Southeast Asia again is growing very quickly. If you remember the previous slide, you saw that right now it's around 18% of the world's production. We see that that's going to increase rapidly as well. Then maybe the smaller players. Hopefully, there's no one from Latin America who's going to get angry at me. I would say Latin America, Middle East, and Europe. Those are going to be the smaller players when it comes to production, because really we have the technology and the drive here to produce these species. So in talking about the aquaculture industry, we really need to talk also about aquaculture systems. And there's some determining factors for aquaculture systems that are very important to keep in mind. Today we saw some presentations talking about how the world is going to change in the future. And these changes are going to affect the aquaculture industries in very specific ways. And so we'll look at these four main things: the water, land, feed, and fish and feed, to see how these are going to be affected in the coming years. Well, we heard that water